Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to this fireside chat with internationally award-winning filmmaker Sooni Taraporevala. I'm Isheeta Ganguly. I'm a playwright, director, and performing artist. And on behalf of the Columbia University Entertainment Board, Catherine Chang, who helms our board, and our broader Columbia community, it is a great honor and delight to welcome Sooni to today's session. Sooni is a screenwriter, photographer, and filmmaker who is the screenwriter of Mississippi Masala, the Namesake, Oscar-nominated Salaam Bombay, all directed by Mira Nair. She has adapted Rohinthan Mistri's novel, Such a Long Journey, and also written Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, which we'll be talking about later today. Her directorial debut is Little Zizou, and her latest film is Ballet, which is a Netflix original film. She's a Padma Bhushan winner, one of the highest.
Sorry, Padma Shri.
Padma Shri, not Padma Bhushan. My bad. Thank you, Sooni. She's a Padma Shri, one of the highest civilian honors in India, and amongst many other national awards that she's a recipient of. Sooni, welcome. It is such a delight and an honor to have you with us today. One has been privileged to sort of see hallmarks of your incredible journey as a photographer, as a screenwriter, and as a filmmaker. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the very beginning in terms of your journey as a photographer. In 1982, you took a break from college and met Raghubir Singh, who looked at your work, of your photography, of your family, your extended family, and suggested that you should put together your first book on the Parsi community. And so curious to hear, the question is twofold. Tell us about your college experience and sort of meeting Raghubir, and what inspired in particular the journey of the love of photographs, and particularly that of the Parsi community, which is of course who you are and closest to your heart, which began a legacy of work which is internationally acclaimed in terms of your work as a photographer.
Thank you. So my original inspiration for photography has been actually my family. We had a studio photographer at the family, and my father was a very good amateur photographer, and several granduncles were also. So I grew up around wonderful black and white photographs, and I got a gift of an Instamatic from my Hong Kong aunt and uncle, which I took with me to Harvard when I went. And for 1 year, I loved it. I mean, I was taking pictures of fall colors, first blizzard, etc. Then found it very limiting, and worked in the music library with a fellow student who was a stringer for the Boston Globe, Steve Giovannis, who said if I bought a camera, he'd teach me how to use it and teach me printing. So I borrowed money from my roommate, God bless her. I did pay her back, and bought my first camera in Nicomat. Shortly after that, I took a leave of absence for a semester, came back to Bombay, ostensibly to take pictures, but because I was really homesick. So from that time, I've been taking black and white pictures of my family and other scenes in Bombay as well. In 82, I finished, in 81, I finished NYU, and after a year came back to India, and that's when I met Raghubir. Mira introduced us because she knew both of us, and he looked at my work, which was very diverse. I mean, there were pictures from my travels from France, etc., mingled with my pictures of my family and other Parsis, and he said I should concentrate on that because I had unique access and it had never been done before. And so after that, he really helped me by way of film and loading me lenses, etc. And that's how my journey started, documenting the Parsis.
And so tell us about your first book. You self-published your first book, Parsis, the Zoroastrians of India. Was that your first book in photography?
Yes, it was my first. And Unfortunately, Raghuveer never lived to see it because he passed away that same year. But I self-published it because I discovered that, with the advent of computers, one didn't really need a publisher like you did before for the art department, etc. And so my very good friend Aurobind Patel designed it. And between the two of us, we put it together. And then I went to Hong Kong and printed it there and produced it like one would an independent film by pre-selling copies, etc. It was harder than making an independent film.
Wow.
Yeah, a second edition was co-published with the Overlook Press and Peter Mayer in New York.
Oh, wow. And your photographs have been exhibited in India, US, France, Great Britain, you've at Tate Modern, as well as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where there's a permanent collection of some of your photographs.
Just one photo is in the permanent collection. It was part of Raghuveer's show. And yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So you talk about, as a photographer, there being a decisive moment when you're taking photographs. Can you say a little bit about that, Sooni? Sort of creatively, what does that mean for you?
The decisive moment, of course, as everyone knows, the phrase was coined by Henri Cartier-Bresson, the amazing photographer, French photographer, who has always been my abiding kind of hero who I look up to. And his kind of photography is one that I respond to the most, which is, for me, the beauty and the challenge of photography is clicking the shutter at absolutely the right moment, where everything kind of converges, the content, the form, the people or whatever's in it, the geometric shapes, everything, light, it all comes together in one very harmonious whole. And for me, that's how I define the decisive moment.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, which is so relevant for this audience. Dr. Ambedkar is a Columbia graduate. He is a symbol of egalitarianism and equality across various divides. Can you tell us a little bit about writing?
So I was living in LA for a while, and I got a call from Ravi Gupta of NFDC, and I had rewritten a script on the Buddha for Mira, which never got made. And I think because of that, he called me to ask if I would work on a script on Dr. Ambedkar that was going to be financed by NFDC as well as the central government. Now, I didn't know actually anything about Dr. Ambedkar, but he sent me his biography by Dr. Kheer. And when I read it, I was totally fascinated, and I jumped on board. I worked with 3 writers. I like to say we were really a nice secular bunch because the director was Muslim. I was Parsi. My fellow writers, Daya Pawar was a very well-known Dalit writer, and Arun Sadhu was a Brahmin, very well-known writer. So we had this whole mix. And it actually took 10 years of my life. But why it's relevant is because the film starts at Columbia.
Yes.
Because he got a scholarship to go to Columbia, and it changed his life. And we start the film in Columbia on campus, actually. And I am actually also I am not a graduate, but I was in Columbia for a semester or a year, I can't remember. And then I transferred to NYU. I was in the film school. So
yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah. Columbia. So I would urge everyone, whoever's watching this, to watch the film. It's available on YouTube. It's about a remarkable man whose life changed when he came to Columbia.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That is definitely on my list to see as well. Little Zizou was your directorial debut, a very lively film the story of the Presswalas and the Kudaijis who are at loggerheads with each other, two Parsi families, and your own children, Jahan and Ayana, feature in it. Tell us about what led from the photographs that you began with, the journey of capturing the Parsi community through the lens. How did that, or did that sort of lead to wanting to create your first film on your closest sense of self and identity?
I think it was a combination of things. I used to always want to make a film set amongst Parsis, but I used to think that real life couldn't match. I mean, a film couldn't match real life. And then I discovered that there were all these wonderful actors. And so as a 50th birthday present to myself, I plunged in to direct my first film. And I think also partly I wanted to make it about something that I knew very intimately, because I don't think as a first-time director at the age of 50, I had the confidence to kind of go out and direct a film about something that I didn't know very well. And the Parsi community is one that I love and enjoy and know very well. And that informed my decision. The script was written with a lot of people in mind. I wrote roles for actors and non-actors, and the roles of the two children were written with my children in mind, and I think nobody else could have played them. And I wrote in a lot of real stuff that happened between them, and I think they were very brilliant in the film, and they're totally embarrassed by it.
They were absolutely brilliant in it. And I was just telling you a little while ago that I went to a packed hall, packed auditorium in South Mumbai, pretty much the week that the film opened. It was so exciting to see your directorial debut, because of course one has followed your career from the beginning, and the kids were absolutely riveting to watch. And so I'm curious, what was it like to direct your own children? I can't imagine what the sort of off-screen conversations were like, what dinner table conversations were like during that time.
I think sometimes they were too exhausted for dinner.
I'm sure.
But we had a screening at Lincoln Center, and on stage, John was asked, what was it like being directed? Both the kids were asked, what was it like being directed by your mother? And Jahan, my son, said it was great because she's much kinder on set than she is at home.
That's amazing. Well, that's great feedback to you as a director, Sooni. That speaks to your, absolutely. But now your son.
To your question of what was it like directing them, it was very easy. Yeah. They were the easiest part of me directing Little Zizou. Yeah.
The music was brilliant as well. My friend Bikram Ghosh was in the music. And I remember talking to Bikram about it when he was working on it, but just a very unique soundtrack. A must watch for everyone, Little Zizou. It's on Netflix, is that correct?
No, it's on Jio, which is just available in India.
Okay, which is just available in India, but it's a must watch film. So from there, you went on to direct Ye Ballet, and that was your next directorial project. Ye Ballet is the story about two boys from poor families who enter a world of the richies, where we basically see two poor boys who address class divides and gender divides by getting engaged or involved in ballet as a dance form, which is of course limited to a certain class and to a certain gender for that segment of the population as well. So we see these two boys entering a world which is very different from the one that they are exposed to, and there's familial conflict of why they want to be a ballet dancer, and along with the complexity of an Israeli teacher who's strict but compelling. First question on this front, Sooni, you were a ballet dancer.
Tell us about. I don't think I took ballet classes. I would call myself a ballet dancer.
But did that did that influence your love for this story? You made this first as a VR project before it became a feature.
Yeah, so my son Jahan was working for Anand Gandhi's company, Nemesis, and
Right.
they were doing VR films. And he came home one day and said, they want to know if you would like to direct one. And I said, sure. And amongst the list of subjects they gave me was this one about two boys doing ballet. And because I had done ballet as a kid for many years, actually, that was the one I absolutely wanted to explore. And when I saw the boys for the first time, I really had tears in my eyes because they were so good. And they were dancing with, torn ballet shoes on a hard stone floor, but they were just fantastic. Far, far, far better than any of us were when we were doing ballet. And so that was my introduction to them and to the story. And I just feel that there's so much talent in India that is untapped. And so that was my motive in making it. I must say that ballet, yes, it has traditionally been very elite, but I don't think anymore. I think more and more young people from different backgrounds are getting into ballet, and it's not the preserve of strictly white ballerinas anymore.
Right. So the story is about Manish Chauhan and Amir Shah's personal journeys. Is that right? And recently, you had a kind of an unveiling in Delhi with Achinta Bose sort of winning a scholarship. Is that right? To elaborate.
CalArts, yeah. So Achintya played Amir. Amir was studying at the Royal Ballet School in London and couldn't take part in the film. And Achintya Bose played his role. And he's now at CalArts. And we had a fundraiser for him in Delhi.
Amazing.
He got a partial scholarship, and we tried to raise as much as we could.
But how phenomenal when life imitates art.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's absolutely amazing. What was the journey of how did you cast Julian Sands, the grumpy teacher?
Julian, I read an interview in The Guardian with him, and we were desperately looking for a teacher. And in the interview, he seemed like someone who loved travel, who loved India. And I spoke to Tess Joseph, my casting director, showed her the interview. And we just took a chance. She wrote off to him. And I think we sent him the script. And, then he was on. And he later told me that he went against his agent's wishes. And after the film came out, his agent admitted that she had been wrong. So that felt really nice. Yeah. It's tragic what happened to him. I miss him tremendously. Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. But a phenomenal film, phenomenal storytelling. And so when people ask you, before we get to the Mira Nair projects, and people ask you, what was the long gap between Little Zizou and Ye Ballet? You were working on an ambitious VFX heavy project. Tell us about that in terms of that journey of working on that project.
It was just something I came up with. It was a futuristic story, love story that took place between the present and the future. And it was about, actually, its time has passed now because a lot of what I wrote about has actually come to be. But at the time, it was very ambitious. It was very expensive. And I tried very hard to get it off the ground, but it didn't happen. The funny thing is when I finally gave up on it completely and put it away is when Ye Ballet kind of fell into my lap.
Right. The law of the universe. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So The piece that I think many in this audience are waiting to hear about and have, of course, a lot of familiarity with from a cross-cultural context is how did the relationship with Mira, when did you meet Mira? You were both at Harvard at the same time, is that right?
Yeah, I was there a year earlier as a freshman in
Yeah.
75. She came as a sophomore in 76. But we were in the same graduating class. We were both interested in film and we got to be very close friends. And that's where we met. And after graduating, she became a documentary filmmaker. And I went to NYU Film School. I didn't learn screenwriting. I did film theory and criticism. The ultimate luxury of studying what I wanted without having to worry about, how I would practically apply that. Because I didn't want to be a teacher, I didn't want to be an academic, I just enjoyed studying it. And so then from that, I came back to India to be a still photographer. And somewhere along the way, we joined forces and Salaam Bombay happened.
So people have compared Salaam Bombay. They've said that Slumdog Millionaire is Salaam Bombay on steroids.
Yeah.
And I love that analogy. I absolutely love that analogy because it's so true in a certain sense. And what was the most riveting part for you of writing Salaam Bombay, which is an Oscar-nominated film? What was the most challenging and the most exciting part of Salaam Bombay for you?
The most exciting and challenging was writing truthfully about a world that really was not my world, that I had a responsibility towards getting it right. And the fact that it was my first screenplay and the fact that it was my first screenplay that was going to go into production, all those things.
Right. Salaam Bombay, just to give our viewers a little bit of context for anyone who's not seen it, is a story that is a very rooted story on India's street children. Sooni and I were just talking a little while ago, India has more street children than any other nation in the world. So it's a very gripping film on the realities of living, making a life, and aspiring for a better one when you're from that when you're from a socioeconomic background, as street children are from in India. Again, a must-watch film if you have not seen it. I'm going to move to The Namesake. So The Namesake, as I shared this with you earlier, that as a Bengali and a Bengali American, seeing a film that depicts the story of Bengali Americans on the big screen was one of the most riveting cinematic experiences of my life, Sooni. It absolutely was. That film told so many stories. It told the story of In Chumpa Lahiri Speak, the third and final continent, the immigrant journey of our parents to the United States, what the loneliness, the challenges that all of that kind of process entailed. And then it told the story of a newer generation, which was Gogol and, for example, his Bengali wife, who are in a complex relationship. They're in a semi-arranged marriage, but they connect culturally. And yet there is a divide and a chasm between them because they're two very different people. And then we see Gogol's wife sort of involved with her colleague, and that leads to the breakdown of the relationship. One of the things that you do so beautifully and artfully is depict romantic relationships in their complexity and in their breadth. And you do this in Mississippi Masala as well. Kathy Chang and I were talking yesterday, and she was marveling at the way that you depict Denzel and Sarita's relationship in Mississippi Masala. And the same is true of Kal Penn, and I'm forgetting the name of the actress, his wife in The Namesake, but what in your creative process as a screenwriter, how are you able to slice these romantic relationships with that depth and that kind of all-encompassing truth where it feels real when you're watching it? It feels like this could be somebody that you know, these could be your friends. I think that's the most powerful part of the way that you depict these relationships.
It's partly the writing, but it's also a lot to do with the actors and Mira directing. And The Namesake, as you know, is a book, a very fine book. And so I can't really take credit for any of that. I think with The Namesake, what was involved was more a question of craft, rather than me creating things from scratch and figuring out really the essence of the book and what would work best on film, and just how to do it on film, and kind of cracking that. And I think the structure is quite, I would say, unconventional. Um, uh, it is not a conventional structure at all. Conventionally, one would have Gogol as the main character, as he pretty much is in the book. But we decided that we would make the parents actually the main characters, or as much as Gogol. And the fact that it jumped back and forth, and not in a clear kind of screenwriting principled way as they teach you, but it still worked. And so that was the challenge for me, is how to translate this book that was so much about time spanning decades, spanning continents. How to translate that into 100 pages maximum. That's always the screenwriter's dilemma, I think, length.
Yes.
And it's a question of just many drafts till we actually came to a happy kind of solution to how to do it.
How involved was Jhumpa Lahiri, the author of The Namesake, in your screenwriting process, or in your process when you were writing?
She was not involved at all. She left us completely on our own. I think Mira might have communicated with her. I certainly didn't. The first time I met her was at the Calcutta premiere of The Namesake, and she loves the film. She very kindly signed and wrote in my copy of The Namesake a lovely message that I will always treasure. And so, yeah, that was it. She really, and I must say the same thing with Rohinton Mystery when I wrote Such a Long Journey. And that was directed by Stula Gunnarsson. He's a Canadian director. Rohinton was very skeptical when I first went to him to talk to him about the adaptation. And I said something that I think put his mind at rest. I said, look, nothing can change your book or touch your book. If the film is bad, everyone's going to say the book was much better. If the film is good, more people will buy your book. So either way you win. Nothing can change your book remains eternally what it is. And so I think he was a bit kind of mollified by that. And he really also, he was working on something else. And so he completely trusted Stula and me and just came for the shoot. I think that's the way to go if you're an author, because any other way I think would be torture. Yeah. Because sometimes maybe you won't even understand the process of filmmaking and why one is making the changes one does, etc. So I think it would be a very could be a very distressing process for a writer, and much nicer to trust the person who's making it and then to see the final product.
Correct. What about the process between you, Jhumpa, and Mira? How was that? A trio of three brilliant.
Like I said, I had no connection with Jhumpa.
Oh,
I
so
met
it
her
was,
first time at the Calcutta premiere.
I see, I see. So it was basically you and Mira.
It was the book. It was the book.
Was the,
I
it
was
was the,
adapting her book, and when I adapt, I try to, because I was a literature student first and foremost, and so when I adapt a book, I'm always very respectful of it, even though the screenwriting maxim is that you shouldn't be, but I am. And so I treat the book with whatever book I'm adapting. And so far, I've had the good fortune to adapt some really wonderful books. So my thing is always to stay as true to the book as possible and make changes that the screen demands. But I don't go into it saying, let's just use the book as a jumping off point for the screenplay. I've never done that.
correct. I wanted to talk about, just still staying with the namesake for a second, the notion of the scene where Irfan dies at the hospital and Tabu finds out she's outside her house in New Jersey, and she sort of lets out, she shouts into tears in the dead of the night in her suburban neighborhood. It's cold, she's alone, and it's one of the most gripping scenes in the film, literally where your heart stops. And similarly, when Gogol goes to the apartment where his father had been living, and he cries out Baba, which means father in Bengali, and you see him sort of overwhelmed by this sea of regret. What were those moments in your adaptation? Were those moments inspired from the book, or were you also able to?
I wrote The Namesake in 2004.
Yeah.
So my memory of it is not that sharp.
Right.
I honestly can't remember whether Tabu's reaction was written in the script, written in the book, or whether it happened in the filming with Mira and her. I really can't remember.
Fair point.
The scene where Gogol comes to his father's apartment, I remember writing that scene, and it was probably in the book. What was not in the book is that he shaves his head, and that's something that I came up with. Yeah.
Yes, that was incredibly powerful. As far as your process in terms of, again, were there moments that you thought you could have directed certain scenes differently, not better? Were there moments as a screenwriter when you looked at the namesake, you sort of thought, listen, I would have done this differently?
I think it was perfect.
Well said.
I really do. I think Mira did an amazing job, and the actors did an amazing job. I've been very lucky with all the films that I've written. I've never felt, oh, the script was better, this could have been better. I've always been very blessed to have been really happy with the final product. No regrets whatsoever. And The Namesake was just perfect. It was just perfect.
It really was. It really was. Mississippi Masala, another cult film for South Asian Americans, literally, part of the DNA of South Asian Americans. And, growing up in the diaspora, the first thought you had when you saw that film was, what a bold opportunity to see interracial relationships, or an interracial relationship, as a reality. I was, interestingly enough, I was in an interracial relationship with parents who were very supportive. And watching Mississippi Masala was kind of a phenomenal journey, I think, for our entire generation, because what we really saw was beyond the taboo of the interracial relationship. There was so much internal cultural judgment within the Indian subcontinent of ourselves that we held to sort of cultural shame of our own belief systems within the broader Indian community. I think that's one of the themes that came alive. But Tell us a little bit about Mississippi Masala and your journey with making it, with writing it.
What would you like to know?
What about the story gripped you, working with Denzel and Sarita?
The story evolved out of research. Oh, sorry. Sorry, one moment, please. That was my father calling. Just a moment. Yeah, the story evolved from research, like it always does with Mira and me, in the sense of, at least with Salaam Bombay, that's how the story developed, and so with Mississippi Masala. We did a road trip around the South. We went to Uganda, and out of all these travels, and reading things like Mahmoud Mamdani's excellent book about the exodus from Kampala, out of all these things, the story emerged. And from also friends who were in, I had a friend who was in this kind of relationship, and also knowing about the aspect of color in India, how important that was to a lot of Indians. So it wasn't just about black and white. It wasn't about Indians necessarily always just being the victims of racism, but it was also about Indians inflicting that on other Indians.
So that's exactly what I meant, right? The sort of with endemic racism within Indians is one profound themes that Mississippi Masala hits upon. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. How was it working with young Sarita and Denzel?
I didn't really. We did readings with them in New York before the shoot, right. And I was on the shoot only for a week, so I didn't really work with them. Mira did, but I didn't. But Denzel, whatever little interaction I had with him over the script was wonderful. He actually came to the place I was living in Santa Monica to discuss the script with me. He once joked that I had written this fantasy of what I expected a man to be, which was fair enough. But he was very charming, very sweet, very helpful, and not at all someone who treated himself, at least I didn't experience that, like a star or anything. And we were extremely lucky that he came on board. And and Sarita, I'm so happy to see all her successes, and we're in touch on Instagram, and I'm just to see her from where she started with Mrs. Masala to now is just wonderful.
Yes, no, absolutely. So I am going to slowly move into questions now, and I want to thank again our Q board, sort of who leads our board, Kathy Chang, Jenna, Stanley, for all the strong support for putting this panel together. It wouldn't be possible without their kind of commitment and diligence in getting everything together. So a big thank you to our team. And I want to ask the first question that's coming to you, Sooni, is from Vic. He's in the film school, Columbia Film School, and he's graduating in 2025. So Vic, over to you.
Hello. Hi, Sooni. First of all, thank you so much for coming and, telling us all about your process. It's been really enlightening. I wanted to ask you about Little Zizou, but before I ask you my question, I just kind of wanted to thank you because one of my fondest memories, I grew up around a lot of Parsis, and so like not seeing them on the big screen was something that I wasn't thinking about. But I remember when I saw Little Zizou, my Parsi friend and I, we both went to go and watch it, and I remember it being a very memorable experience. So I kind of wanted to ask you about, you kind of talk about like what the inception of the idea for the film was. But I wanted to ask you about, there's such an ensemble cast in the film. I wanted to ask if you have any stories that you could share with me about, how it was like working with, Mr. Bowman Irani and Zenobia and all the other Parsi actors who were in the film.
It was a blast, to tell you the truth. We had a really good time making the film, and Baman is an incredibly generous person and actor. And actually, we had him only for 9 days, which is pretty incredible. When you watch the film, you couldn't guess that, but we shot everything that he does in the film in 9 days, and he brings so much to it himself. Like the Mambo Italiano dance is totally his. And when he did it, I looked at my producer and said, "Can we afford to just roll on this?" And she said, "Yeah." So we did, because it was shot on film. Little Zizou was shot on film, so it's not like endless digital. Yeah. And as I said, a lot of roles were written for the people. Zenobia, I found by chance. She was in Bombay, and a friend happened to see, and I was desperately looking for someone for that role, and she was perfect. And Imad is someone who plays Artaxerxes I've known since he was 3 months old. When I was a still photographer, he used to come on set for Perfect Murder, where his parents were acting, Nasir and Ratna. So I've known him since those days. And so many other people, Shanaz Patel, Surab Adeshar, all Parsi theatre, English theatre stalwarts. And then I cast a lot of family and friends, and my husband used to joke because he'd say, "Anybody you're meeting, you're saying, want to act in my film? What kind of film are you making?" But it really was that kind of film, and I'm told that audiences in Bombay, at least, were wondering, like, who's going to come next? Who's going to come next? Because they were all such familiar faces.
Thank you. I was looking to about 10 years after it was released. I was trying to find it online, and I could only find one DVD. But I'm glad to hear that you can find it on Geo Online.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a
I have
period
plenty
in
of
between.
DVDs, but now DVD players are going obsolete.
Yeah, but thank you for answering my question.
Thank you for watching Little Zizou. I'm thrilled.
And now the second question, by the way, Bowman's dancing was absolutely riveting in the film, Sooni. It was brilliant. The second question is from Kate, Columbia College, class of 2023.
Hi, thanks so
Hi.
much for having me and for speaking
Hi.
with us today. It's been so fascinating. So we've heard a little bit about your collaborations with Mira Nair, and I'm very curious, sort of how does your process change when you're collaborating with the director versus when you are the screenwriter and director of a film?
How does my process in writing? What process?
Yes, if you have a different sort of kind of preparation for the film, and then how involved you are during the production when
As a
you're
screenwriter.
Mhm.
As a screenwriter, I am of course not as involved as I would be if I was directing it, and my work is generally thought to be over when the film starts shooting. First day of principal photography is when screenwriters get most of the money, their paycheck. But always at the end of a phone line, in case anything needs to be rewritten or changed. As a director, I am there right from the beginning, and I'm first person in, last person out. So that's a huge change for me. And screenwriting is pretty solitary. Direction is about collaborating, and I've fallen in love with that. I love collaborating with all these amazing people who are working so hard to kind of translate your vision onto screen. And it's very exciting and I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sooni, we have a question from the chat box. Sooni's writing is so inspiring. Could you please talk about your screenwriting process in terms of how you manage your time and structure your work, and how this process has evolved over time?
Okay, so my screenwriting process is a very idiosyncratic one. I don't know if I would recommend it to anyone. I never learned screenwriting. I came to it indirectly through photography, through studying film, studying theoretically watching films and studying them, and through English literature, studying character, point of view, narrative techniques. And from all those, I think that helped me write my first script, which was Salaam Bombay. I didn't know what the 3-act structure was when I wrote Salaam Bombay. I found out about it later. But I think stories very naturally have a beginning, middle, and an end. I think if I had learned screenwriting formally, I might never have been a screenwriter because it might have felt too complicated and I might have dropped out. So my process is that when I'm writing, I am writing morning to evening. I outline, but very briefly, because I'd like to know how it's going in very general terms, like how it's starting, how it's ending, kind of what's in the middle. And then I start writing. And I'm a firm believer that the writing actually is the process. It is what informs the characters. It is what informs the dialogue, because I feel that as I'm writing, I am discovering the characters, and then the characters have a life of their own, as opposed to writing a blueprint and an outline and then kind of reverse engineering them and putting the characters into that outline. I work the opposite way. I discover the characters. I discover the story and I discover the characters as I'm writing. And then, of course, endless edits, endless rewrites. This is sometimes not a process to recommend to others, because if you're stuck, it's very good to have a method by which you can get unstuck, like a formula, for want of a better word, or some methods that they teach you. I know none of that. I read all these screenwriting books, and sometimes I try and feel my way around that. But mostly this is something that I've come up with on my own, which, as I said, is kind of idiosyncratic and not for everyone.
That's beautifully described as screenwriting as sort of a zone where art meets science. And it sounds like your process has been so organic, Sooni, in terms of how you developed your own unique style, which comes through in the brilliance of the work. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Jenna Farley-Fleming again, and Stanley Clark for being the wind beneath our wings for this Zoom session. And now the third question is from Alexis, Columbia College, class of 2021.
Hi, Sooni. Thanks so much for being here. I was an English literature student too, so I really loved hearing about that part of your process. I was wondering, in your filmmaking, you're often dealing with different cultures, different languages, and even sometimes moving from a medium like Jhumpa Lahiri's novel to the screenwriting medium. So how do you think about the concept of translation when it comes to your work?
Translation as in language?
Language or like medium to medium, however you think about it.
I don't quite understand your question about translation.
I guess,
Because I don't see
yeah.
my work as translated from one medium to another. For instance, if I'm writing a screenplay, I'm writing it so that it can become a film. So it's not really a translation. It's like an architect makes a blueprint for a building. That's the analogy. Um, uh, I'm sorry, have I not understood it completely? Please elaborate.
No, that totally makes sense. I I guess I was thinking about like when you're writing a script, are there certain times when you're like questioning if a line should be like in one language versus another, or how you deal with those kinds of questions in like a multilingual script?
I write in English, and if the language is going to be Hindi, for example, it is then translated into Hindi. So I'm not writing in two languages or three languages. My language is English, which is then translated. Very often, the language of the film is dictated by the producers, by what they want. Very often, um, it's thought that a film in English will sell better because not everyone likes reading subtitles. So there are all those factors that really have nothing to do with the story or the creative process, but are about the business aspect of film, which is actually a very important aspect of film. One can't avoid it, you know, because what we do is so expensive and there's such an investment of money and people want a return on their money. So it's not like one can just say, oh, forget it, I'm going to do what's best for the film. I also have to consider those factors sometimes.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question to Sooni before we gradually sign off. In terms of the creative process, for example, for the Namesake, the scenes that were shot in Kolkata, were you equally present with Mira in terms of when she's interpreting the script and directing? Were you actively involved in sort of interpreting aspects of the script, or did Mira drive the process of?
Not at all, not at all. Mira is the director totally. I did not inform any of that process. I was in Kolkata when they were shooting for a week or 2 weeks, I can't remember. But I was there to have fun. I was there with my kids and my mom. And I was hanging around on set, taking stills, but I did not participate in any of the creative decisions that went into making the film. That's entirely Mira.
Got it. Tell us what you're working on now, however much you can say.
I'm not allowed to say what it is or what it's about, but it's a 9-episode TV series for Amazon. And it will hopefully be out in the first quarter of next year. And I hope you all watch it and enjoy it. And it's something that I wrote and directed, but I had 2 other writers as well, but I did direct all the episodes. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Sooni, thank you so very much for making the time to be with us and to be with the larger Columbia community. We have an audience on the West Coast, an audience on the East Coast, and of course, an audience IST. I think it's been a riveting journey just to be able to capture your work in all its facets. Thank you deeply from all of our end, and I want to thank the Columbia team again, Jenna, Stanley, Kathy, and others who've been involved in the curation and execution of today's Zoom. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Our pleasure.